firms that I've been talking about, is it a Me Too offering? Some of the more low-tech sectors, that's probably going to dictate it. We've heard the term dynamic capabilities used by David Teese, but sometimes actually people use the term wrongly in the academic literature. Capabilities are one thing, but how good are you at it? So competences is something else. And to what extent can the coaches here in the group, the academics, the policymakers, actually develop those competences as well as harnessing in on those capabilities? But co-petition, another academic term, which is simultaneous collaboration as well as competition, is also important. The clusters, something David Teese talked about, something very dear to my heart because I've done a lot of work in that, a lot of knowledge sharing, a lot of equipment sharing, even pooling of resources, because we know that some of these campaigns are expensive. So yes, you might have these distinctive capabilities, but that's not to say that in terms of helping to internationalise, you don't collaborate as well. Anyway, in terms of getting the funding, I showed you the Wellington model earlier on. Sometimes some of the funders, or let's call them the incubators, want this disruptive technology in an economic sense. You've got to do something different. You've got to be movers and shakers, and you've got to have that wide market appeal. Otherwise, you're out of there. They're going to pull the funding on you. So, in terms of what we're going to talk about tomorrow, there's a lean startup session. What kind of things can we take from this? Well, very quickly, in terms of this lean startup model, validation is very important. Is there enough market demand out there? Can you evidence it? In terms of the rollout, which markets are you going to? Why? Commitment over what time? How can you add value? What is the point of differentiation? And is that significant and sustainable over the competition? What about the access to the market? Over what time? What priorities? Can you do it on your own? Do you need team members? What kind of support are going to help you? And if so, what knowledge are they going to bring to the table, as well as the funding? How best to source it? If you are going to get that, what are you going to spend the money on? If it's adaptation, why? What's needed in the marketplace? What evidence have you got? Patents, can you actually fight off the patent if somebody breaks it? And will actually losing an equity stake really matter to you? Well, outside of that, in terms of a revenue model, whoever it is that you're trying to convince, what are your affordable losses? We always think about the positive side. What about the downside? What are your exit strategies in terms of risks and rewards? So I've only got 15 minutes with you. I don't want to go over time. So what I'm actually saying is that instead of using the term born global, at least think for high-tech firms, born international, or probably die local. Thank you very much.
Our second speaker in the session is Mrs. Heidi Humla. Heidi is a task manager at InfoDev, a multi-donor global program in the World Bank Group that supports growth-oriented entrepreneurs through business incubators and innovation hubs. Currently, she is a manager of InfoDev's Business Incubation Management Training Program, which develops the capacity of business incubator managers and practitioners in the field. She has been working closely with Badr Program, developing a strong partnership with the framework of the InfoDev Incubator Management Training Program, and she supported the certification of 12 local Saudi trainers to deliver the same program in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for that lengthy introduction. So indeed, my name is Heidi Humala, representing the InfoDev program at the World Bank Group, and I've been invited here today to share findings from a recent report that we published at the World Bank pertaining to international market linkages through business incubators. As already mentioned, InfoDev has a long-standing and strong partnership with Badr and SBIN for the Incubation Management Training Program. And it's an honor to be speaking here to all of you, and it's always a pleasure to be in Saudi Arabia. So thank you for having me here. All right, so just a few words about InfoDev itself. InfoDev is housed at the World Bank Group, and as part of the World Bank Group mandate, we of course focus primarily on emerging markets and developing countries. Within that mandate, we focus in particular on competitiveness, inclusive growth, and job creation. And how do we do that? We work with incubators accelerators and innovation hubs to support growth-oriented entrepreneurs. We speak a lot of innovation, and we also try to do a lot of innovation at INFIDEV. So we are able, through the nature of our program, to test out different models and programs that are agile and innovative and can live with the quicker life cycle of entrepreneurs themselves. We've been around for 20 years now already, and the headquarters are, of course, based with the World Bank headquarters in Washington, D.C. We are 100% donor funded, so we operate actually independently of the World Bank core budget. We receive independent donor support for our program, and what's also interesting to point out is that we receive a lot of private sector support as well, and we are engaged in a lot of public-private sector partnerships. And this, of course, speaks to the importance of engaging corporates and the private sector in innovation, also for innovation of smaller companies. Now, this slide just gives you a quick overview of the intersection of sectors and activities that we work in. So we focus primarily on mobile innovation and ICT. We focus on climate technologies. We focus on agribusiness, and also as a cross-cutting theme, we have a focus on women-led entrepreneurship. Now, what are the activities that we do across these sectors? Venture acceleration, of course, incubation, acceleration, innovation hubs, as already mentioned. We work in particular in access to finance as well, and it was already mentioned in the previous session, the notion of this valley of death. And we work in particular to help entrepreneurs overcome this valley of death situation. We do that primarily by attracting and engaging angel investors and trying to create angel investor networks in our client countries. We produce a number of knowledge products, of course, along the way as we test out these different activities and try to understand why something is a success and why something is a failure, and have a number of toolkits and papers, of course, available online. And we have quite vast experience, both good and bad, in supporting incubator networks and, of course, running this incubation management training program, which was also mentioned. But okay, in the interest of time, let me just show you also quickly this so you get an idea of the types of interventions that we currently have going on the ground and what this means in terms of the funding and the engagement period for these different interventions. So we have a number of mobile innovation labs and hubs and climate innovation centers that are already active in a number of countries around the world, and we're also looking to be setting up agribusiness innovation centers in the near future. And so you can see there what the average cost and investment period is for these activities. And of course, being here, INFIDEV is open to speaking with any of you if there's interest in these types of interests in Saudi Arabia or in any of the other countries represented at this conference. But okay, so why am I here? So this is the report that we just recently published at the World Bank related to our recent activities pertaining to internationalization. And I think a lot of the rationale in terms of going global or going international were just covered by my colleague there in the previous presentation. Just to clarify in terms of what does internationalization mean for us, we didn't put a strict marker on what that means, whether it's global. I don't have a fancy matrix, unfortunately, about that. But what we were trying to do is see how we can support these companies in getting outside of their domestic markets, whether it's just in smaller regional markets, whether it's in a new continent, whether it's the entire globe. So we haven't put any further indicators on that. But I would say that from the bullet list here, the three M's, I suppose, of the rationale are money, management, and market. So of course, in many cases, also pertaining to internationalization, there's often the lack of access to capital for entrepreneurs to be able to successfully internationalize. So that's the money part. On the management side, there is a lack of managerial knowledge in terms of what that means to internationalize. And we noticed that also on the company level as well as on the business incubator level. So what does that mean in terms of the management, the resources that you need to pull together to successfully internationalize? In terms of markets, what do we actually know about the market that we're entering? We have to, of course, have a demand-driven approach for any product or service that you're trying to put into a new market. You know, do we know the market well enough? Are we able to validate quick enough when we internationalize? So those are the 3 M's. And of course, INFIDEV, working with incubators over the past 20 years, does see the opportunity and potential of incubators to support companies in this process. So what is the value add of the incubator in this process? That's what we were trying to find out. And this slide just gives you a recap of the hypothesis itself. So enablers can play a critical role. But then how did we go and test this hypothesis? We carried out 4 pilot activities over the past 1.5, 2 years or so to better understand what the company's needs are in these international markets and how the enablers can potentially help them enter those international markets. And I might mention that these activities were actually supported by the government of Finland in partnership with Nokia. So this was one of the public-private partnerships that we had at INFIDEV, and of course is therefore also linked quite closely to our mobile innovation program. So what did we hope that we could achieve through these 4 internationalization pilot activities? First of all, of course, you have to find the right kind of companies to work with, right? That's the bread and butter, and that's the bottom line of anything that we do, is the right kind of companies. And in our experience, working with business incubators and enablers is a really effective way of screening the types of companies that we could find for this kind of experiment, and that seemed to work quite well. Another objective, another thing we wanted to achieve through these pilots is to, in parallel, build the capacity of the business incubators and enablers to better support the internationalization process. And in doing that, so I'll go into a bit more detail later, we did a lot in terms of the business modeling of the service line development at particular business incubators. Thirdly, we wanted to test this idea of co-incubation, soft landing, which I believe we'll be talking about later on in this panel as well. And so that was actually a huge pilot activity that we took on. I think we've learned a lot in terms of adequate resourcing and so forth for that one. And then finally, we wanted to test this notion of mentorship and online coaching and virtual assistants, which are surprisingly easy, actually, to engage with companies. We had a great experience with that, and it's definitely something we're going to go forward with in the future as well. But the importance of mentors was incredibly valuable throughout this work. Altogether, the activities reached about 200 early stage enterprises from more than 35 countries, really across the globe. We had a number of them from MENA, but not yet from Saudi Arabia. So I hope in the next round we'll also be catering to Saudi Arabian companies. All right, so this is a recap of the pilot's activities themselves. And I mean, there's a lot of text. I don't want to go into too much detail, but I think the slides will be shared, and maybe you can think of them as food for thought in terms of any future internationalization activities that you might be designing. So we had these, what were called the INFIDEV Top 20 co-incubation pilots. We selected from over 700 applications. We selected 50 companies to attend our 4th Global Forum in Finland in 2011. And we matched those companies with investors and industry experts and so forth. And in the end, ended up selecting 20 who received a small cash prize and more mentoring and assistance to enter international markets. Then we had the Venture Out Challenge, which was quite a different type of activity altogether. It was a really intense 6-month program, which involved a competition, of course, selecting from a number of applications. There was a competition, there was mentoring that we did online, actually, before everybody was brought together at a boot camp, a 2-day boot camp, and a final pitching session. And we selected 3 finalists who then won, again, just a small cash prize, but the even bigger value of the mentoring to help to take their product or service international. Then we worked in internationalization service line development, which essentially means working with business incubation management to help develop their internationalization service and how to make it actually a sustainable part of their service offering for their client companies. The money for this activity was earmarked for Eastern Europe, so we were quite active in this in Moldova and Belarus and worked with altogether 10 companies as well while we worked with those incubators. And then training workshops, always beneficial, we find, where we trained business enablers as well as entrepreneurs themselves in conjunction with other workshops and events that were taking place. So I hope you can see that. We were talking about failure, and I guess this is my personal failure, trying to get too much into one slide. But there are a number of success factors that we were able to determine through the pilot activities that we carried out, and there are 4 success factors in particular that I was hoping to highlight to all of you today. Interestingly, the success factors at enablers create value add for the enabler as much as they do for the company. So I hope there are really some incubation practitioners in the audience who can take some practical takeaways from what I'm sharing here with you today. I should also just point out that the four that I will go through, so there's this in the next slide, I wouldn't, we put them in different boxes, but they're actually very mutually reinforcing as well, and more so than they are standalone ones. But I'll just have a quick run through them. So they might seem obvious, but it's not so obvious when you look closer whether or not this is what's actually happening at the incubator. So the first success factor that we find is important and adds value to the internationalization process is, of course, industry expertise. So you can have industry expertise in-house, or you can have an enabler, an incubator who has excellent connections.